The 3 principles of dynamic figure drawing. Before I dive into step 1, 2, or 3, I wanted to give you guys step 0. Step 0 is getting your anatomical knowledge to such a level where drawing a figure that looks like this, just a standing pose, straight up and down, perspective neutral, in your own style is like a breeze for you. It should be significantly easy, and if it's not, you are not ready to do dynamic figure drawing. I'm not saying you might not be ready, I'm saying you are not ready. If drawing a pose that looks like this from imagination is hard for you, drawing a pose that looks like this from imagination will be damn near impossible. I'm speaking from an air of experience. I tried to do dynamic figure drawing way too early, and I crashed and burned and subsequently got very frustrated when it didn't work out for me. Take my word for it, avoid my mistakes. In order to define what makes a figure dynamic, we have to start out with what makes a figure not dynamic. This is what I would call the least dynamic pose that you could possibly draw. Center line is facing straight towards us. Person is looking straight at us. Everything is square. What you'll notice here, no matter what I do with these arms or legs, this pose still looks very stiff and very boring. What should that tell you? What makes a figure dynamic is like 99% determined by just the head, the rib cage, and the pelvis. If you want to start making dynamic figures, focus on these areas because your arms and legs truly don't matter all that much. Your game should be never drawing a pose that looks like this. But MRD, you're surely going to say, what about that pose you showed us at the very beginning? This would be boring. Imagine looking at this pose and this guy is looking straight forward. This head tilt introduced a lot of drama to the pose. That's why you can't neglect the head. It's not all in the body and it's not all in the head. It's a little bit of both. So how do we manipulate this figure to make it a little bit more dynamic? The first strategy that we're going to use is tilt. As soon as you read the word tilt, your brain probably did this. This is a tilt. Don't get me wrong. This is definitely a tilt, and this can definitely help your pose become more interesting. But this is just a tilt in one dimension. What about a tilt that looks like this? And his arms are kind of back like that. Hands are on his hips, or they're in his pockets, I should say. This is also a tilt. I acknowledge that this looks a lot like that. What I was essentially attempting to do is this. So imagine you're looking straight up at this, and this is leaned forward, and there's like a bunching motion that happens with this part of your body. That's what I'm trying to convey. This is also a tilt. I'm tilting the pelvis. And most advanced, this is like a full body tilt. Let me kind of shore up this perspective a little bit more. I know this kind of looks shit, but the point is, you need to be a little bit more creative about your tilts if you want to build poses that look a little bit more dynamic. Don't just do this. This can also tilt. Your head can also tilt. This guy's head is kind of tilted forward. Be very creative. This is just a tilt in the X direction. You also have to think about the Y and the Z. The next principle of dynamic figure drawing that we need to cover is twist. Now, unlike the last one, twist is kind of straightforward. Obviously, this would be a twist. You can imagine all the different variations of twist that you can do. I don't even think that I necessarily need to go over it. Where twist becomes really important and very useful is when you combine it with the tilt. Take this pose, for example. If you look at the 3 major landmasses, the head, the rib cage, and the pelvis, the only thing I did with this, I incorporated a twist and a tilt. Like literally, this is what I started off with when I was drawing it. And let me exaggerate it a little bit more. Don't be afraid to exaggerate it. You'll know when you're pushing it too far because your brain will tell you that you're pushing it too far. It's very intuitive. Just exaggerate it like as much as you can, and that'll get you where you need to go. So this pose, if I'm completing this just to complete the idea and complete the thought a little bit, I could have just put his head straight up and down, but I incorporated a head tilt. So his head is tilted like that. I know I made this look very easy. This took like months of study to be able to do easily with my mannequin. It's very simple when you break it down like this, right? All this is this. The last principle that we need to cover is probably the most difficult. This is overlap. Overlap is what happens when there is a tilt or a twist that is so extreme that parts of your body get obscured. It's way easier to demonstrate this with arms and legs because they're a little bit more omnidirectional. Let me just draw an arm and you can see what I mean. Obviously, right, this is just an arm that we're looking at straight on. Now imagine I took this same arm and I drew it like this. Now there's a little bit of depth created because now I'm implementing an overlap. And you can do the same thing with the human body. Unless the pose is like really extreme, there's not going to be much of your rib cage or pelvis that get obscured. Let me show you what this might look like in practice. And this is why it's kind of hard, because it's like very unintuitive. It's kind of hard to think about. You have to incorporate a lot of mental math here. So obviously, this pelvis is obscuring part of the rib cage. Not much, but a little bit. I have to put a little bit of anatomy in because that makes it kind of pop a little bit. Now again, this is not perfectly anatomically sound, I get it, but it gives you a rough idea. And then of course, if I was drawing and completing this leg, if you ever look at booty, the way I look at booty, you feel me? You're gonna notice that booty shelf. If someone's leg is pointing towards you, the booty shelf is gonna look like that, right? I know y'all know about the booty shelf. I know y'all know about that. Anyway, right, so the booty creates this motion, right? A little S curve. And that's created by the overlap, because this thigh is overlapping the booty, this booty is overlapping the thigh. Or if I'm doing another pose to exaggerate a little bit, just to show you guys what I'm talking about. Right? So now, if we're looking at this, we can see that the rib cage at least partially obscures the anatomy of the neck. That's why you don't see much of the trapezius. And of course, you have wrapping lines, kind of. And your midsection is going to be partially obscured by your pelvis. Now, again, I'm exaggerating, but that's how you learn, right? You exaggerate a little bit. Now, what you start realizing is that overlap is not just about the macro level. This arm is overlapping the body. This arm is overlapping this arm. This leg is partially overlapping the pelvis. I want you to also look at the micro level. Overlap is like implemented into all of your anatomy. Look at this. This deltoid sits on top of, therefore overlaps this shoulder blade and the muscles therein, the teres major and whatever that is, you know, all those muscles, which sits on top of and overlaps the latissimus dorsi, the lats, which insert kind of in the armpit a little bit up there, which sits on top of or overlaps the serratus anterior, these little shark teeth muscles that go down like this, which interlock with the external obliques, which then interlock with the abs. That's why overlap is very complex, and it's not something to be taken lightly. Now, what happens when you put all three of these together is you get interesting dynamic poses. So I know with overlap, I already blew my load a little bit. There's a twist happening here and an overlap happening here. Look at some of these little poses, right? Tilt, slight twist, overlap. This is what I got from one of my secret sources. If you want to know what the secret source is, you have to look in my recent posts. Shouldn't be too hard to find, all right? Look at this pose. It's a cool pose. It's all right. You know, this guy is holding a sword running towards the camera, but he's kind of square, right? Look what happens when I even implement just a slight tilt and a slight twist. Look what happens. This gets so much more dynamic. Even though the arms didn't change much, even though the legs didn't change much, this pose looks a lot better. Now, what I didn't talk about today is foreshortening, and that's because foreshortening does not necessarily make a dynamic drawing. I'm flashing it up on the screen right now. There's like a pose that I did on punching. That pose was really stiff, even though it was very foreshortened. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, I've been talking long enough. Let me go ahead and start from the top and give you guys the